the Jeff Buller Show. Today I have with me Josh Little. Now, Josh Little is quite an amazing man. He started life as a teacher in his career, and so did I. So that's why I like him. Already I liked him when I heard that he was a teacher. He's the founder of 4 tech companies, Maestro, Bloomfire, Qzzr and Volley. And these are collectively been used by hundreds of millions of people, and his work has been featured in TechCrunch, Mashable, Entrepreneur Inc. and Forbes. He's done 2 successful exits and a 3rd pending. He's currently on a mission to save the working world from death by meetings. You've got me there straight away there, Josh. With his 4th creation, Volley. And you can find Volley at volleyapp.com. Okay, so Josh fell in love with the art of communication at the age of 16 when he was first asked to train a new employee at Red Lobster. That was a restaurant. The creative challenge of distilling complex concepts into simple ideas became a passion, led him to pursue a degree in education, and he leveraged land jobs in sales training and marketing at 3 Fortune 500 companies before he founded his first company. He's a bit of a battle-hardened serial entrepreneur, and he can cover a whole range of topics. And today we're going to have a little bit of a chat about his life journey, his entrepreneurial journey. Welcome to the show, Josh. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's all my pleasure, and that was a wonderful intro. Thank you so much, Jeff.
So, Josh, you started life in your career as a teacher. And why did you leave?
Oh, we're getting right to the deep end of the pool here, aren't we?
We are leaping in.
Well, growing up in my hometown, I saw 3 options. I could either work at the prison because there's a large state prison in my hometown, or I could work at the power company where my dad worked, or I could become a teacher. And that's really all, or work at a restaurant, but I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I chose teacher. And I kind of knew during student teaching, this just wasn't my thing. For some people, it really is. Like my best friend, just it's his calling in life. You can tell he would never leave for any reason. But for me, it just wasn't. And I knew, and I taught for about a year. And although I loved the art and the craft of teaching, I just didn't love it as a career. And so I left trying to figure out what could someone with this skill set do for the world other than teach? And turns out sales. I was very successful in sales. The same skills that made me a good teacher made me good at sales. And that kind of started my career in the corporate world.
So it's very interesting that a lot of teachers are good at sales. So very strangely enough, I discovered by taking a part-time job at night while I was teaching, I did some part-time selling. It was my side hustle. And we'll have a chat about side hustle a little bit about what I don't think is a good idea. But I started selling at night, 2 or 3 nights a week, selling subliminal suggestion tapes. And I made more money in 2 or 3 nights than I made my entire week at school. So this is really bad. So for me too, I discovered that sales was fun and I could accomplish things faster and get rewarded for being successful. So what sort of sales jobs did you do?
Well, the first was selling DSL before it was a thing, before anyone could even get it, which is high-speed internet through a phone line. And so I would just get inbound angry customers that would call the phone company. And then I try to pitch them, hey, this thing that you don't even understand that I have to explain quickly over the phone. And found I was actually pretty good at that. And then went into a gig at a pharma company called Pfizer. You may have heard of it. And then another sales job at Stryker, which is a medical device company. So kind of more technical, healthcare oriented products. But yeah, it turns out if you can motivate 11th graders to not burn down a school, you can also motivate people to buy a thing, right? And you probably found the same thing. Those same skills transfer over.
Yeah. Did any of your students try and burn the school down?
They did. The year before I started there, they burned down the library. It was a rough school for sure. Right. I won't mention the name of the school, but you could probably find it out.
Yeah, that's a tough gig in a tough school. So
Yeah.
so you're doing sales. So and then you moved into being an entrepreneur. So was there a sort of an aha moment where you're going, I need to start and create something like a business? Was there any sort of
Yeah.
particular time you remember? What was that?
It's funny. I grew up with a really profitable lawn mowing business. I started when I was 11. I was an entrepreneur at an early age. I just didn't know it. My mom was an entrepreneur. She didn't know it. She just did odd jobs, cleaned houses, painted walls, wallpapered. Um, and so it's funny that I grew up in and around that, but didn't understand what that was or how to do that. And then went off to college and got a degree and thought that was just the path. But then I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I know that book's been great for a lot of people, but for me, it was like a revelation. It was like, what? You can own a business if you want to. You can be wealthy if you choose to. Like, how could this even work? It was just kind of beyond me at the time. And I don't know why, given where I started, but that book was kind of it for me. But it took 5 years of me thinking and talking and having lots of lunches with coworkers and friends about what businesses we could build and kind of planning and validating before I stepped out, and even starting a couple of things on the side before I stepped out and started my first company.
So was it sort of going, well, I can create something myself. I'm tired of working for the boss. Is what sort of tipped you over to choose to start your own business in the end? What got you over the line? Because a lot of people go, I want to do it, but the big question is, what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was less about, I didn't like the corporate game and all of that, of course, but it was less about that. And it was more about just creating something for myself. And I knew I had it in me. I knew I'd made these companies millions of dollars, selling these products. If I could sell their stupid products, I could sell my own stupid products. Right. So just had to figure out what that product was and why. And, I had notebooks. I was flying around with Stryker all around the world, 5 nights a week, different cities. And I have these notebooks, actually, they're in my library right behind me here. And I would just keep notebooks of like different ideas I had, from water flavoring packets to car air fresheners to this, to that, to this, and I draw designs and logos and think about them. And started practicing the entrepreneurial thinking. Yeah. But it took, like I said, about 5 years until I felt confident enough about any one of these ideas that it was worth actually just going all in and trying to make it happen. So it was more about like, what could I do? And it got so bad actually at one point that my wife knew. I was just so green in the corporate world and so excited about leaving and doing my own thing. She just knew it was going to like happen any day. It was like spontaneous combustion. This guy's just going to explode, go crazy and quit his job, go with Jerry Maguire and start something. So we controlled it a little bit more than that, but not a lot more than that.
So you had all these ideas. How did you choose one? And what was that?
Yeah, it was just the one that I had the most degree of confidence should exist that I could build, that wouldn't require an insane amount of capital, that we could get to profitability pretty soon. Yep. And so I was a corporate trainer. So that the transition I made in my career in sales, I typically did very good at sales, usually one of the top reps, if not the top rep. And Pfizer and Stryker both asked me to come in-house and train everyone else and show them how to do that. And so, of course, with the education degree, that was a natural fit. So I became a sales trainer at both companies. At Stryker, the medical device company, I was trying to build an e-learning program. And this is 2004, 2005. We didn't have the tools that we have today back then. And so I was working with like videographers and 3D animators and developers and content writers and LMS providers. and trying to pull all of this circus together myself. And it was like a full-time job just to coordinate all of this. And I thought there should just be a company that does this. Like, why can't I just hand my binders and my CDs? This is dating me, of course, again, 2005, over to some company who can just build them out and make beautiful experiences for learners and put them on an LMS. And I couldn't find that company. And so I left and created that company, which is now Maestro. And turns out I was right. And pretty much every other training manager in medical device and pharma felt the same way. We were able to, get the who's who of clients pretty quickly. And today Maestro builds content for Netflix and Microsoft and all kinds of cool companies.
That is very cool. So you took your unique gifts, which was being able to communicate.
Yeah.
You took your experience of working in those companies and your skills and innate ability. Sales is one of those. You took those and worked out how to solve a problem, because the problem was trying to use technology to help do learning, and then you called it e-learning. So I'm fascinated by this area. In other words, what makes you uniquely qualified to do this? I got asked that by another entrepreneur. He said, one-page business plan, Dave Levinsky. He said, how do you write a business plan? He said, number one, write down what you're going to sell in one sentence. And then next, just write down why you are uniquely qualified to do this and provide it to the world. You tick all those boxes, mate. It's really, really impressive, because...
You think?
I think so. What
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I disagree. I don't know that I am uniquely qualified. That my answer to that is I'm not. I'm just dumb enough to try, or brave enough to try, maybe.
Well, you had enough elements to add to the potion.
Yeah. Okay. Had enough ingredients already there for sure.
Like, I think this is where I think people struggle with uniqueness. It's got to be totally different to everything else. I think there's a uniqueness to your particular spices. It's like KFC.
Yeah.
The secret herbs and spices. Look, those spices aren't unique. It's the curation and collation of those that makes them unique. And I think that's what you brought to the world. So that's really, really, really cool. So you started Maestro e-learning, and what happened from there? Did you what was the challenges with you once you stepped into that? You needed to grow it. So how'd you do that? How did you do the growing? Selling?
Well, that was the challenge. That's why I say I don't know that I was uniquely qualified, because we were just making it up as we went. You as a teacher know, a teacher is really only like one chapter ahead of their students, potentially in the content. It's not like, it maybe look like you know what's going on, but you really just kind of developing your lessons just barely ahead of the students, especially if you're, teaching a new course.
That's all you need.
So that's what we were as entrepreneurs. Is embarrassing it is to admit, the first day I quit my corporate job cold turkey, started my company, I went to the Chamber of Commerce and showed up, and I was like, hey, I'm here. What should I do? I'm trying to start a company. And they're like, what? Huh? They told me about a thing called an LLC. And I was like, well, okay, tell me more. I had no concept of what to do, what needed to happen in what order. Of course, now that I've done 4 of these and a couple more that I don't even talk about because they're not worth it. But of course, we know the drill. We know all the tools we're going to need and set up the bag. But at first, it was very much like we're just one day ahead on our learning. And so we just figured it out as we went. But what I did know when you speak to ingredients is how to sell. And in my first week with Maestro and how to communicate, I took some of the spine anatomy training that I was doing at Stryker and created some courses in a free software that I downloaded, just mocked up some courses. And then I flew to a couple spine manufacturers in Texas that I knew of, spine implant manufacturers, and just pitched them. And they were like, yes. I was like, what? How much does this cost? And I had to make up a price on the fly. I hadn't even thought of that question. I haven't even thought of them actually saying yes. So I made up. I said, he wanted 9 courses. I was like, $90,000. How does that sound? Okay, let's do it. And so then I had to go figure out then how to do it, how to, actually create these things in a way that you could put them on someone else's LMS. Again, today, this is all easy stuff, but back then it wasn't. So had to hire the team and go through all of that, but did have a leg up in sales. And so you're totally right there.
Yeah. And you work out the rest as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're all doing. We're all faking it until we make it magically.
Yeah, exactly. So Maestro was from 2007, 2010. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And did you exit that company, sell it? What happened there?
Well, with Maestro, we started working with dozens of training programs, and we got to see kind of at a high level the problems that existed with getting someone to know what they need to know to do their job. And only about 10% of that do you actually learn from quotes training. The other 90% you just learn by osmosis, ad hoc interactions around the water cooler, that text, the email that person sent, the video that this person created, and all of that was just scattered all over. And we kind of saw that trend at multiple companies. And we thought, yeah, what we're doing at Maestro is valuable, but what about that other 90%? How do we solve that problem? And this is around the time, Facebook's new, Twitter's just launching. And we thought, you know what, the way to share is kind of like the way that you share on social media. What if you could post to your team? What if you could post a message or a video to your team, like closed social for work? What if that could be a thing? So we liked that idea enough that we took the profitability of Maestro, invested that in a software platform called Bloomfire. Yep. And it worked. So again, we were super early, like the world's just getting used to Twitter. And then we launch hey, you could be social at work. Now I know today in 2021, of course, we're going to share videos and messages with our coworkers, and we're going to have chat, and but back then it was a wild idea. But there were many forward thinking companies that were able to adopt it. And the company was acquired in about 18 months. So it was pretty hot back then. And then just like 3 weeks ago, it got acquired again by a private equity firm. Turns out we were right, but just pretty early with that idea.
Yeah, I looked at what Bloomfire was about, and I loved it, to capture tribal knowledge and promote collaboration. Yeah, when I started my business and the blog back in 2009, what excited me about Twitter and the other was that you were connecting to your own global tribe. You're able to connect to a tribe globally, and like-minded people collaborated. So I got to know a lot of the marketing people around the world, and I do love the aspect of Bloomfire that you mentioned, which is to capture tribal knowledge. And it was the Wild West back then, that's for sure.
It was. Yeah. And it probably is today. We'll look back 10 years from now like, oh man, remember 2021? That was crazy coming out of COVID.
That's right. So you've got Bloomfire. So step up to today, you got the Volley app. Where did that idea come from?
Well, I'd like to think I've been thinking about this problem for over a decade now. How do you get the right information to the right people at the right time at work? And that's very much what Maestro and Bloomfire were solving. But there's very much a right way part of that equation. And we had tried with the last 3 companies to work remote. And, you read Jason Fried's book and you're like, yeah, let's do it. And then you go remote, and then it's just hard to communicate because you still have the same 2 options. You can either type or you can talk. And that what that looks like today is either being back-to-back Zooms all day or chatting your face off in Slack. And both of those are strained, and both of those are problematic for different reasons. One is inefficient, one is slow. And so we've never actually been able to get the remote thing to work. And we settle with like okay, let's do work from home Wednesdays or something. So basically we're just going to hold our breath on Wednesdays we don't have to communicate that much, and then we'll get back together Thursday. So it's kind of that experience of trying to work remote, trying to figure out how to communicate, falling in love with communicating on tools like Snapchat and Marco Polo, and the pandemic hitting that created kind of the perfect recipe for like, I know what the world needs: a better way to communicate with your team when you're remote. And this is the way, using asynchronous video, kind of the best of both worlds, the richness of talking, the richness of Zoom with the flexibility of text or of Slack. Like, put those together. What do you have? Volley. And so if you're listening, you don't know what that even looks like. It's in Volley, we take turns, just like Jeff and I are in this conversation, except you record your turn with a video or Volley. And that allows the flexibility that we need. So I can say what I need to say and move on with my day. Jeff could respond on his own time. And that might be seconds later, it might be minutes later. Either way, I don't need an answer right now. I'm just wondering, where Jeff put the olives in the fridge or whatever that is. I don't know. That was a stupid example. I don't know why I thought of olives in the fridge. So, that's so random.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've just been watching Billions, by the way, which is a Netflix, which is here on Stan. It's got some of the best writing I've seen. The analogies they use. If you love word crafting, go and watch Billions. It's just amazing. The analogies used. So great writing. I'm trying to, and the two founders, the co-creators of it, are the primary writers initially, but they've got other writers. But I fell in love with words about 10 or 12 years ago. I fell in love with reading when I was 6, but I love that communication part. Now, you used a big word called asynchronous video.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you explain to the audience what that is? Because when I heard it for the first time, I'm going, it's sort of like a bit like SEO. What does that mean? Asynchronous video.
Yeah.
The concept's simple, but please explain.
Well, if you're not a nerd, then it probably doesn't immediately resonate with you. But asynchronous just means not at the same time.
Yep.
So synchronous means when you have a synchronous conversation at the same time, that means you're listening to me while I talk, I listen to you while you talk. It's synchronous at the same time in synchronicity. Asynchronous means it's separated from time and space in some sort of way. Now that may just be seconds apart. Like I said, in Volley, sometimes I'm listening to your Volley, you're listening to my Volley. And when that happens, we do often say, hey, we should just jump on a synchronous call. And we do. But for everything else, we use Volley, which makes asynchronous better. So email is asynchronous, chat is asynchronous, text messaging is asynchronous, meaning you can text me and then 20 minutes later, I can see the text, respond to you when I have a moment. That's the beauty of asynchronous. And so a lot of people are saying that the future of work is all about asynchronous by default, that should be the default mode of communication. And the reason that they're saying that is because of the value of deep work, the value of flow. If you were hired to do a job, to do something meaningful for this company, that can't happen if you're constantly interrupted by back-to-back meetings or Slack messages in between. You need time and space to go deep and really think about something, write the manifesto, create that new video, whatever the thing is that you need to create. And the best work comes out of this deep flow state, which is this uninterrupted state. So we like to think by allowing asynchronous communication to stretch deeper into the spectrum, because with Volley, you can do things that you would have normally scheduled a meeting for, like a stand-up or a weekly check-in or a one-on-one or brainstorming. You can do those on Volley asynchronously pretty easily. And it's just a couple of volleys that you need, right? Yeah. So we like to think we're enabling a lot more deep work happening in the teams using Volley.
So I'm just been reflecting on where the word volley came from. Is it to do with tennis?
Well, it's used in tennis, it's used in volleyball, it's used in ping pong. But yeah, volley just means to send something over
and
to
wait for
the
it to
other
come
side.
back. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Right. Well, actually, the comeback part is called a rally. So we thought about naming volley rally for that reason, but the rally didn't seem to connect as well as volley did, because a volley in tennis is once over the net. A volley in ping pong is a back and forth rally until you win the serve, right? So when you say volley for serve, nobody needs to know this, but that's why it's volley. It's not technically correct because volley is very much back and forth. You talk, I talk, we take turns, but that's what seemed to click with people.
Yeah, I like it. Really love it. That's great. Because I was thinking, reflecting on the name volley and going, well, it's where you send something. The volley is you volley back to the tennis player, others on the other side of the net.
Yep.
It might be only a second coming back, but it's still asynchronous.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you probably know this, educational research shows any time you can take even just 3 seconds to think about your response before you give it, you're going to generate a fundamentally better response. This is Mary Bud Rose research that if you give a student time to think, like if you tell them, I'm going to give you 5 seconds, they're going to come up with something better. And you don't allow anyone to talk because the smart one or the loud one is going to jump in there with an answer, and the quiet and the dumb one like me is not. So it allows that time to think, that asynchronous. And so conversation in volley is just better because I can take time to think, or I can restate something. Sometimes things don't come out exactly right, or I don't get it right, or I'm thinking through it while I'm talking about it, and I can cancel it. I can delete it. So in live synchronous conversation, we don't have that luxury. We can't take it back. We can't reel it back in. We can't say it again better. It's an opportunity to not obsess, but just put our best foot forward. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, the thing I like about asynchronous video, and I do use it, starting to use it more. For example, I'm hiring some new writers, and I'm able to record the video, and then I can share the link later, and my team can look at it at their leisure and then give feedback instead of trying to organise everyone to catch up and do a joint interview. So yeah, I love it. It's very efficient. The thing that you mentioned, which I love, it's the term deep work. I think that's really, really important. There's a great book by Cal Newport that I don't know if you've read it, but talks about deep work. And this is where a little bit of the struggle is with social media, is that people are so distracted that they have trouble doing deep work. In other words, they're doing what we call superficial work. They're not, and this is one of the things I noticed in reading a bit more about you is trying to take complex information and distill it to making it simple. And that's something resonates very much with me.
Yeah.
And especially you coming from a complex technical medical sales background, trying to get across a simple message about a complex product requires that distillation. So it's really, really important. And I think to have the non-distracted or undistracted time to sit down and craft something or learn something, which is deep work, is important. Excuse me. So you started Volley. I'm just thinking about the challenges with that. Number one, you've got to create technology.
Yep.
So how's that going?
It's going really well. I won the co-founder lottery this time. My 3 co-founders are just amazing. We're all very good with our hands. Like we're building a pretty amazing team. Just everyone ships, everyone is good with their hands. And Volley enables us to all have uninterrupted periods of work every day. Yet the ease of just leaning over and asking a quick question as if we were sitting in the same room, because we're all remote. Of course, we should be remote if we're building a tool like Volley, right? But it's going really well. We started last May. We had a dog food prototype by end of June that we were using as a team.
Dog food prototype.
Well, just one that we could use ourselves. That's what dog fooding means, like use your own product.
Right.
right? And then by September, we were in private beta and then worked with our beta users until earlier this year and released cross-platform on Android, iOS, and Mac and PC. And then we've got a couple of thousand teams now using Volley, and it's growing organically each week, which is pretty exciting. That's what you hope to do with a product-led company, like product-led growth company like Volley, users inviting other users. And so it's going well, but we haven't nailed it yet. We're kind of perfecting it. Volley's a new way to communicate. Some people aren't sure about it. Some makes some people a little bit nervous. They don't know what to think, like recording a video of themselves. Many people in the world, even today, have not made a video of themselves ever, like even posted it to YouTube or on Loom or wherever, right? So surprisingly, it's a new thing for some people. So it takes some getting used to, but we're making great progress and just learning from our users every day. And there's a direct channel that we have with our users. All of them have a direct conversation with the team here at Volley. And so we hear feedback nonstop throughout the day that's constantly, we're hearing like how the product's being used. We're getting a heartbeat of what's going on and where it's breaking down. And we're shipping new value each week. So we're doing the thing, and it seems to be working.
So, what's your growth strategy? You said organic growth. So, you created the product and you're getting it out to the world. How are you sharing your product and growing it?
Yeah, it's product-led growth. That's only the only long-term sustainable strategy with Volley, a product like Volley, a communication product that really doesn't work unless someone else is on the other side of the court, just like volleyball, So the only way for this to work for me is to get you in. So if that doesn't work for us, there's no amount of performance marketing or content that is going to let us run to some meaningful outcome with Volley. We've got to nail the product. The product has to be so good that you can't stand to not invite your friends or family or coworkers or team into it and start moving work forward, which is why we built the product, to help move work forward faster, with more connection, in a remote world, and maybe even reduce the meetings along the way.
Yeah. Was part of the inspiration for starting it, was there sort of like an aha moment for you, or co-founders? Did you meet over a beer? How did you get started with Volley?
It's crazy. The co-founder story here, in the past, I've known my co-founders for years, some decades.
Yep.
With Volley, I've never worked with these guys. I knew Joe just because we were like portfolio CEOs in our last company, of the same portfolio of the same venture fund. So I'd see him at meetups a couple of times. But I mean, Joe and I maybe I don't know, combined, I probably had 3 hours of conversations with my co-founders before we started the company. So all to prove there's no amount of like interviewing or camping together or spending time together that can really let you know whether you work well together as much as just working together will do. And we knew it the first week. It was just like, oh, this is magic. This is clicking. It's working. And we're finishing each other's sentences. Stuff's moving forward. So yeah, it was really the co-founder story. And then you ask, I guess, what was the genesis? And that's kind of what I pointed to earlier, is just the thinking about the problem, the pandemic hitting, loving asynchronous video, all coming together right around April of 2020.
Was that a collaborative idea, or was it, can you claim it to be your idea as a product concept?
Well, it was my idea, but I've thrown a couple of ideas over to Joe before, because he's like a world-renowned mobile designer. He's built several products with tens of millions of users, and so I've always been wanting to work with Joe, my co-founder, head of product and designer. But the ideas I've sent him in the past, he's like, nah, don't see it. But then Volley, it was just like immediately like, yep, that's it. That's going to work. And so that day, like I had a call with him at noon. He was designing Volley that night. He left the gig he was working on, he left his gig, his job, within a week, and we founded a company together.
Wow. That's,
yeah.
And so the pandemic's actually been interesting, hasn't it, from a point of view of we're changing the way we do business. Like we were changing the way we did business before, but the pandemic's almost like accelerated change, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it works unfolding before our eyes. The way we do business, the way we work, the need
Yeah.
for travel. I think we're all trying to figure it out together, which is fun. You know, Simon Sinek launched a video a couple months ago, and I think it's spot on. He said, "We're living on borrowed time here. You realize that we're working on the relationships that we had established before we went remote. If you have to start something new in a remote environment, it's totally different. It's way harder. You already had those. The reason you feel connected with your team is you already knew them. You worked with them for 5 years or whatever that is. And I think that's very true. In fact, I just got some research back today. I don't want to misquote it, but it was something like some research that we sponsored. High 80% of people felt onboarding was a challenge in a remote work environment, that just getting up to speed and feeling connected with their coworkers. And then I won't quote it because I don't know the research well enough. I was just reading it right before our call, but a really high percentage of people felt that they wouldn't be able to identify their coworkers in a lineup if they saw them only by name and avatar, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, I do like the term you use. You could identify them in a lineup.
Right.
Obviously, that comes from working in a town that had a large prison.
Yeah. You never know.
No, you don't know. So, look at this. This is all the conversations around remote work. I've interviewed quite a few entrepreneurs that provide platforms that manage workers, and then there's the issue of privacy, and then you can measure keystrokes and all those sorts of things, which gets a little bit scary. One of the entrepreneurs I talked to has got technology that uses AI that can predict 6 months in advance when their employee is going to leave.
Wow.
So, but he's using a data set of millions and millions of people. So, so the remote work's interesting. Working on a new product, and I just love to get everyone in the room and whiteboard it, like different areas of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss that human connection, like bouncing stuff around. And there's whiteboard tech. So what's your views on remote work? I'm sure, are your co-founders in the same city, state, country? Are they remote?
Same state, the co-founders, but the team's spread all over, but all in the US. So if you're asking vision about remote work, there's only one way it's going to go. I don't think it's going back in the box at this point. It's out of the box. Like it's only going to be more flexible, more dynamic, more balanced. It's more of what we want it to be, right? And we have the catalyst or the opportunity to make it that. So we see remote work being, very modality driven. You mentioned digital nomad earlier, but that's the typical day of a remote worker. I'm in a coffee shop in the morning. I'm then in an office, then I'm out at lunch somewhere, then I'm at home, then I'm walking the dog, then I'm picking the kids up, then I'm back at home. Each of those modalities, you need a different communication tool. You can't Slack while walking the dog. You can't Zoom in a coffee shop, or you shouldn't. And so you need a shapeshifter of a communication tool. So this is what we're very much focused on is allowing Volley as a communication tool to show up how you need it to. You can go into silent mode, you can read the transcript, you can volley back with audio or video, but allowing Volley to show up how you need it to, so that you can show up how you need to your team in whatever environment you are. It's very much I talk, you read, she listens, because we're in different places and we're switching spots throughout the day. So that's what I see the future of communication of work being, only if we have the communication tools to get us there, because communication is the foundation of remote work. Communication is our culture. Without communication, what is our culture? It's pretty much everything. So the way we communicate is the way we relate, the way that we trust, the who we are as a team. So we hope to be a big part of that. That's at least our vision.
Yeah, I think that asynchronous video and that way of communicating. And with the tools we have now can be built quite quickly, quite inexpensively compared to what we had even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the tools we have at our fingertip is a lot of people don't even know they exist. They just, and they sort of, because a lot of people are still, I suppose, bound by traditional industries, the paradigms of traditional industries, which is embedded in our DNA for centuries, effectively. So I think the challenge for most of us and for humanity is thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had enough exposure to be able to do that, think differently.
Yeah.
So Volley is currently free, is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So what makes Volley different to, recording a video in Zoom or using Slack? Tell us a little bit and I had a look at your matrix a bit there. So what makes Volley a great asynchronous video messaging tool?
Yeah. So unlike Loom, which people make a lot of comparisons because they're an asynchronous platform as well, asynchronous video. Unlike Loom, where you volley in a threaded conversation. So Loom's point of view is very much video is a piece of content. Our point of view is that video is a vehicle for communication. And so when you talk about asynchronous in Zoom, it's the same thing. I'm making a thing. I'm sending you a link to a thing. You can comment on it or email me back. But in Volley, you just volley back. You just record a video back. And that's all in a threaded timeline in Volley. So and Slack, instead of typing, you're talking in Volley. Now you can still write a text Volley if you're not camera ready, or you don't need a lot of context or tone of voice or body language to see the package arrived. Like we don't need much there. But if you're trying to say, hey, I've got this new idea, I'm thinking we should go a different direction, that's going to suck as an email. That's going to suck as a Slack message. And you're headed toward scheduling a Zoom call for that, which is interruptive. So Volley is somewhere in the middle of all of those, trying to pull the best parts from each. There's still a lot of good reasons to meet synchronously. You cited one earlier. If you really want to feel the energy of someone around a whiteboard, yeah, get together in a room or on a Zoom. But for everything else, there's Volley. And so we like to think we'll take over your Slack behavior. We'll take over your Loom behavior, as well as much of your Zoom behavior. So you can kind of look to Volley as kind of a go-to tool that makes all of your asynchronous communication better, because there's no argument that a video message couldn't carry a lot more context, a lot more humanity, empathy, tone of voice, body language than a text message. And the classic example is, we need to talk. That's a horrible thing to write in text, but that could go a million different ways if it's spoken and the message is just loud and clear.
Yeah. It's okay. So I do like the idea of threads. In other words, it's like email, it's like a message. It's, in other words, it's connected to that person and you are following back and forward using asynchronous video. Okay.
Yep.
I got it.
Like video Slack or video. Some people, it's like video texting. If you could do that, what would that be like? If you could video text someone, like, like Snapchat. Yeah, like Snapchat. But now I think you could create a workspace and have channels and so it's like Slack. Yeah. So now you're getting in the ballpark. It's kind of like all of those things had a baby and called it Volley and sent it to business school.
Yeah. So in terms of going, as you're growing, obviously you're identifying the different types of users. What's the different sort of personas that target markets that you think will really resonate with your product, Volley, and video messaging? Asynchronous video
Savvy
messaging.
question. Yeah. Well, it's different than what we thought when we released, that's for sure. What we're finding, we thought we were the end of meetings as we know it. That's what our beta users were telling us. Turns out they're wrong. Turns out there's a lot of great reasons to have meetings, like I said. But what we found now that we've got a couple thousand teams using Volley is they're picking up Volley instead of Slack and Loom, not instead of Zoom as much, right? Which is exciting to us. And so therefore, with the typical prototype of the target user, it's a small team. It's like less than 10. They're trying to do big things. Stakes are high. A lot of them are side hustles, right? And therefore relationships are new. They're trying to establish them in a remote environment, and every interaction counts. Communication matters for them. And so they're picking up Volley because yeah, of course, I can speak 7 times faster than I can type, and time is of the essence. And we're trying to do something big, and I'm trying to get to know these people. So why wouldn't I use a video messaging? Like this makes total sense for them, right? Yeah. So that's it's like small teams trying to do big things. We're finding startups, side hustles, small e-commerce companies are using it. Coaches, influencers are using it to kind of connect with their audience. Lots of cool different ways, but yeah, we've got Apple, Amazon, Google's using Volley, but they're not the teams that are tearing it up. The teams that are really tearing it up are the teams that I'm mentioning. Companies you haven't heard of yet.
Okay, very, very cool. So you've done all these startups. You've learned a lot along the way. And I know you don't like answering off the cuff too much.
Well, we'll see how I do.
But we'll see how we go. But just to wind up the podcast here, and I'm cognizant of your time, what have you learned along the way that you can share with people that want to start their own either side hustle or launch in, leap into the void and start their own business? What are some of the top 2 or 3 things, or just one thing that you would like to share with our audience that you've learned along the way? What do you bring back to the world after this incredible journey so far, and you've got a lot more to do? What's 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things that you think you've discovered that are really important?
Yeah, well, I kind of quoted one earlier, and I speak at different universities, and so I'll just share some of these things that I share. Just like one of them is be brave enough to try. You have to be brave enough to try. I don't know that I was uniquely qualified. I did have to create Maestro. I don't know that it had to be me. That could only come from me, but I was brave enough to try. And so that's the start of it. And then you have to make sure, probably secondly, that the medicine actually cures the disease. Before you go try to get a bunch of people to take this medicine, make sure that it actually cures the disease. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far if you're selling a placebo. So make sure your product actually works, that it has product market fit, that people are actually getting the result that you want them to get, not just faking it, right? And yeah, you can sell and sell. And so I've had a little bit of that in each company where I didn't quite get the product right, but was able to like will the thing into success. And with Volley, we're very much trying to make sure that product is nailed and make sure that people are just wild about it until we really try to push hard on growth. And then maybe thirdly, to throw a third one on there is don't be afraid to move the boat. I like to fish, and I've found that if you don't get a fish in the first 5 minutes, you're probably not going to catch a fish. Yeah. So you're going to do a lot better moving to a different spot on the lake than you are trying different bait in the same spot, usually. So Eric Ries, Steve Blank, they call this a pivot, right? But don't be afraid to move. Try another market, try another avenue, try a different way to position the product. You're going to get a lot farther than staying on the same course, beating your head against the wall, trying, to hold your mouth a little bit different when you talk about it this time. So, just move until you land them. And then once you find the spot, you'll know it, because you can't keep your hook in the water.
Yeah, well, I love that analogy of move the boat, find another spot to fish. And some of the research shows that most successful startups pivot twice. Yeah. So that's what research shows. Yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah. With Qzzr, we built a quiz tool. We thought we built it for teachers and trainers, the world's simplest quiz tool. Check it out. They gave it blank stares. And at the same time, we had publishers say, oh, that's good. And they built quizzes and embedded them in their website and just blew the thing up. Like overnight, we had millions of visitors to Qzzr because of these big publishers that we're finding. And we're like, oh, okay, I guess that's what Qzzr is for. So we pivoted and totally went that direction. But you never know when you start.
No. And that's why keeping the planning simple sometimes, and then just
Yeah,
stepping into the gap, and then don't worry too much about the hows, because the universe will reveal those to you.
hopefully. Yep,
Yeah.
indeed.
So just to wind this up, Josh, how did they get in contact with you, and how to download and use the Volley app?
Well, right now, those are kind of one and the same. If you download Volley, you're added to a conversation with the team, which I monitor. So volleyapp.com. We have apps for iPhone, Android, Mac, and PC. So download Volley, invite your team. And if you want to look me up on LinkedIn /Little Josh, I'm pretty responsive there too.
Thanks, Josh. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with my listeners in the world. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to speak with a fellow teacher turned entrepreneur turned marketer. Right? Yeah, we're one and the same.
Yeah, there's a few common points of interest and experience for sure.
No doubt.
Thanks, Josh. Hi everyone, and welcome to Expert Insights. And today I have with me Josh Little. Now, Josh Little is a serial entrepreneur and has founded 4 tech companies and exited 2. His latest venture is the Volley app platform, which is a video-first approach to messaging. He has a passion expertise with starting and growing companies, communication, company culture, productivity, and asynchronous video messaging. And we're going to find out what that is in a moment. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Number one is, you obviously have some superpowers in starting and growing companies, Josh. So where do your ideas come from?
Well, once you enter the entrepreneurial mindset, it's hard to turn it off. So the ideas really come from having an eye for solving problems and just spotting problems. And people don't like to go to restaurants sometimes with me because I just see it like, oh, why is that sign there? The garbage can should be, why are we walking to this end of this counter? We should, and you just see problems, and then you want to fix them. And you once you've fixed a few of them and created a few companies, then you sort of know how to also solve the problems. And so that's where the ideas come. And I just keep a little spreadsheet full of a couple hundred ideas that
Wow.
I think somebody ought to build someday. And I pull that out whenever I'm doing my next thing and try to pick the best one.
So what you've stated is a mindset, a way of thinking that is always top of mind.
Yep.
What is your top tip for growing a company?
Well, it's hard to do, but relentlessly pursue the most impactful thing. I like to ask myself the question, what would insert your favorite entrepreneur do? So for me, it's Richard Branson. I actually don't know much about Richard Branson. I just insert his name for some reason. That gets me in the right place. What would Richard Branson do? If I'm looking at the things that I'm doing today, my task list or with things I plan to do, I'll ask myself, would Richard Branson be doing this today if he was the CEO of Volley? Almost always the question is no. He would not be doing this or that. He would be going to strike up a deal with this person or on his yacht making this happen or flying into some stadium. I can't do some of those things, but I can get out of my pacing mindset and think bigger about what I'm doing. So try to relentlessly pursue the most impactful thing.
Awesome. Third question under starting and growing companies is, how do you set up a company to sell?
You don't. Companies are bought, not sold. You build a valuable, enduring company. That's what you do. Build an enduring company. That has to be your goal. If you're building a company to sell, you've already lost. You're already optimizing and focusing on the wrong thing. If you build a company that could last for 100 years, that's just so beautiful that you would never want to leave it, that's a company that's going to get bought. Not the one that you're like trying to figure out how to flip.
So build a valuable, enduring company that people see value in. Great. Okay, the other superpower area expertise you have is workplace communication. Where did the curiosity around workplace communication rise from?
I think and grind and just feeling the slowness and the pain of that world and disconnectedness that you often feel in the corporate world. I think that's where it came, and just feeling like, things should just move faster, and communication should just flow. And we got to set up a meeting to talk about our meeting so that we can then decide in another meeting. So I think that's where the curiosity was, just kind of the pain that I felt working in the corporate world, and then trying to solve it as an entrepreneur, building my own companies.
Okay. Number two, what is the big benefit of getting that right? In other words, solving that communication problem.
Yeah, I mean, work moves forward faster. That's the ultimate goal. We're trying to do big things, and the likelihood of that is really dependent on our ability to communicate, our ability to be in the flow of work. And if that's hampered, it's really hard to make big things happen, to overcome the odds of the world and be competitive. But if you can get it right, you're kind of unstoppable for a team your size with similar resources. Communication is the ultimate competitive advantage, I think.
Cool. What is your top tip for creating a great workplace communication environment?
Well, you have to be deliberate about it. You have to define what that is and how we talk about things. And for example, I had an engineer last week. We have a channel called Away from Camera. It's our version of Out of the Office. And he was like, popping in there, hey, I'm going to be picking up my kids from school. And I had a conversation with him, and then kind of mentioned to the whole team, hey, at Volley, we just don't need to do that. Unless someone's counting on you for something, you just make it happen. And maybe you volley back from your car while you're waiting for your kid in line at school or whatever, right? But so you have to be deliberate about how we communicate and what's worth communicating over, and what are we flexible about. So your communication is your culture, and if you don't define it and you aren't deliberate, it will be defined for you.
So in other words, take control of your communication and make sure it's good.
Yeah.
And that will be and then you'll be very productive, because then you have to be dancing around miscommunication. Okay, the third superpower, Josh, is you're an expert at video first messaging. Why is video messaging so important to a modern company, especially in the world of remote work that we've moved into?
Well, the top two problems with remote work are lack of communication and loneliness, according to Buffer's remote work study last year. And we all feel it when we went home in the pandemic. Those are the first couple of things we feel. We just finished a big study that cited the same thing. And so what our users tell us is that Volley helps them communicate better because it's video versus a text. And that's the other 93% of communication, that the full picture that tone of voice and body language gives you. And not only, and that therefore helps them increase connection to overcome this loneliness, feel like they can tell the joke. They can, show where they're at, show how long the line in Chick-fil-A is or whatever, just the humanity that we used to have when we were in proximity to one another. But Volley also kind of reduces meetings, which is another huge benefit, because, we're now spending more time in meetings than we ever were, because talking is so important and collaboration is important, and we're no longer in the same place, and we've got to figure out a new way to do that.
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially in the current environment we have. So what is asynchronous video?
Well, it just means not at the same time. That means I don't have to listen to you while you're talking, and you don't listen to me while I'm talking, but we record our conversation. We take turns, just like any other conversation. We just record our turn with video, and that allows us to separate that from time and place, so that you can say what you need to say, move on with your day, and then I can 20 seconds, 20 minutes later, whenever that is, like a text message, view your video, hear what you had to say, hear your question, and then respond to it in whatever format makes sense. And usually that's video. So that's asynchronous video, and that's how it works in Volley.
And a term I've heard you use before is essentially Volley's difference is that it's basically creating a video thread messaging.
Yeah.
So, which is very, very cool. And I think we've answered why should we use it, just to sum it up.
Sure. Well, you can move faster. That's the main benefit that we found, is that you're just able to move faster as a team. We would not be able to do the things that we do at Volley with the size of the team that we have without Volley. Like, we can't imagine going back. And I know we built the product, but we now have a couple thousand teams to back us up on that point.
Thank you, Josh, for revealing your expert insights in some very important areas of starting growing companies, workplace communication, and the importance and superpowers of video first messaging. Thank you very much, Josh. And they can find Volley where?
volleyapp.com. You can download Volley for iOS, Android, Mac, and PC, and invite your team.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you for your expert insights. It's been awesome. Thank you.
That's been my pleasure. Thanks.